The hour is quite late. We've read a lot of Torah. I will be brief. I want to point us to just a few verses in the Torah reading that, again, as I mentioned before, we read very quickly, but if we can slow down, we find great insight. And the few verses are as follows, again from the scene of Reuven and Gad, the Reubenites and the Gadites who, the Torah tells us, owned cattle in very great numbers, and they approach Moshe, and what the Torah tells us in verse 5, it says, and they said, wait, hold on, where did it go? Hold on. Hold it. I know they did say. Hold on. There we go. Okay, it's in the middle of verse 2. In verse 2, we read, Vayavo b'nei Gad u'b'nei Reuven. So b'nei Gad and b'nei Reuven come, Vayomru El Moshe, and they say to Moshe and to Eleazar HaKohen and to the princes of the congregation, saying, Atarot and Dibon and Jazer and Nimrah and Cheshbon. I said we read too quickly, and I'm reading quickly. And Eliah and Sabam and all these places, the land which the Lord smote before the congregation of Israel is a land for cattle, and thy servants have cattle. And then the Torah says again, Vayomru, and they said, if we have found favor in your sight. And the rabbis pay attention to this. The Torah first says, they said, and then again says, they said. And the implication is when that happens, and there are other examples in the Torah, if you want to check me, talk with me at Kiddush, but the implication of that is they said, and Moshe said nothing. And so they kept talking. And what's happening here, if you listen to it again, is they say, the land which God smote before the congregation is a land for cattle, and thy servants, meaning we, the sons of Gad and Reuven, have cattle. Hint, hint. Nudge, nudge. It's good for cattle here, and we have cattle. And Moshe says nothing. And then they say, if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants for a possession. Bring us not over the Jordan. And the meaning of that silence, so there are different interpretations about why it is that the Torah does this repetition. They said and they said. Ibn Ezra and Milgram in the JPS commentary, I think, give the most boring explanation, which is that it's a long speech, and so you have to remember who's speaking, and so we repeat it over and over again. I think it's much more interesting. Abarbanel says that Moshe is sitting there listening, and he's not going to say it for them. He needs them to say explicitly, what do you want? He's not going for the hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Right? His silence draws out of them the explicit request. Okay? You got to ask for it. If you are going to talk about staying here and not going into the land, I'm going to make you say it. Because you have to own and you have to take responsibility for this request. Okay? I think the power of our silence to draw out words from others rather than jumping in with an answer to a question before it's been fully asked is something that's beautiful about that explanation. I want to share with you one more. Judy, we're not taking questions today. You can ask me a Kiddush. But I want to share with you one more from a commentator named Tzur Hamor, who says that he notices that first Moshe is speaking to, or Bnei Gad are speaking to Moshe and Eleazar HaKohen, and the princes, they're speaking to everyone. And then in the second part, he's speaking, they are speaking only to Moshe. And he explains this as follows, that as they're saying it the first time, hey, the land here is good for cattle and we have a lot of cattle, they see that Moshe is getting angry. Okay? Moshe doesn't say anything, but they see that Moshe is looking at them and is getting very, very angry. And what they assume is that Moshe is getting angry because they are making this request not only to Moshe, but also to the princes and also to Elazar HaKohen. And they think that Moshe is getting upset because they're speaking to everybody instead of Moshe, who's the real decision maker. And so when they come back the next time, if you pay close attention, they're speaking only to Moshe. And they say, oh, if we have found favor in the sight of your servant, right? But just to you, Moshe. And then there's a beautiful insight about this, and I've sort of lost some of my notes, but the beautiful insight about this from a student named Ronnie, who's a student of Dr. Walter Hertzberg, who was teaching the section, and what she pointed out is that B'nai Gad and B'nai Ruvain think that Moshe has the very flaw that they actually have in themselves. B'nai Gad and B'nai Ruvain are saying to themselves, oh, Moshe must be worried about his honor, right? And must be seeing himself as somehow set apart. And that's why he's getting angry. He's not angry at the fact that they may be abandoning the Jewish people. He's not angry at the fact that they may be trying to get out of their military obligations. Moshe is worried about his honor. And so we're going to speak just to Moshe. But really, that flaw is not in Moshe. It's a flaw in themselves. They are the ones who are setting themselves aside from the rest of the people. And I think that that's also a very deep insight about human nature and about the human character, that we assume that somebody's getting angry, we assume that someone has a problem, but oftentimes that assumption comes from something in ourselves and not something in the other person. So I'll leave us just with a plea. I could show you several other places in this Torah portion and other examples of how when we slow down and we read carefully, there are psychological insights and richness that come from the Torah. And there's a lot, as my mom would say, I'll finish by quoting my mother, right? Who can go wrong with that? That the music is not in the melody, it's found in the silence between the notes, right? And the richness of the Torah is so often found in the silence and in the pauses and thinking about what's happening. So may we treasure it. Amen and Shabbat Shalom. Please rise. We're going to turn to 420.